Thanks, Amy. So I'll be covering the role of the sibling and also the role of peer and friend as we go along in this journey. I have two younger siblings on the autism spectrum and going to be talking a little bit about our journey together when we think about the care team. So you can go to the next slide. So families, by definition, if we have to define it, are dependent units of people, sometimes biological, often can incorporate everything in between. Siblings in that are the lifelong relationships that serve as a peer to one another in friendship. Um, Siblings change over time, and by nature of really being that peer, often we're changing together. We're changing in terms of the journeys that we're on and sometimes perspectives in life and the roles that we have. Specific to a family who has a special need or autism or a developmental difference, sometimes siblings take an additional role. They can take a role as a coordinator or care team leader and then negotiate those different roles across time. You can go to the next slide. So families need one another. All of us need one another. The overall functioning of a family, though, is important, and especially important when a child has a special need. Research supports this as well, that a better functioning family directly impacts the child who does have that special healthcare or developmental need. And when we have more and more people on the team, a larger family unit, putting all of those people together, biological and everything in between, there is a link there when you think about the siblings and peers in that family of lower levels of loneliness and higher levels of finding that social support. Go to the next slide. So here's my family. Siblings are a unique role in a lot of families. Here's me with my younger brother and sister. We're each 2 years apart. And so we've gone on these journeys of different life stages together. Siblings in a family with autism are at higher risk for psychosocial adjustment. And as they go along those journeys together, may have their own unique stories as they are going along with their siblings. Research has shown that when you look at a gender difference, sometimes female siblings take on a greater responsibility and are affected by the presence of some of these developmental differences as you go along in life. You can go to the next slide. Roles change across time because we're all changing across time. As a peer, we are developing together and experiencing sometimes those same elementary years or burdens or next steps that come along with being a teenager. And that can look different as a family is also encountering differences in doctor's appointments and just figuring out how treatment looks when you have a child with a special need or with autism. And so in those elementary years, families are sometimes negotiating and figuring out the diagnosis, adjusting to next steps, IEPs, figuring out lots of treatment appointments for early intervention. As school age comes, you have the additional influence sometimes of peer groups, different school placements, and figuring out how are we going to just go along and continue in life with different care needs. Adolescence or those teenage years introduce new variables. There may be thoughts about, well, what is this going to look like moving forward with other peers and friendships, new questions of sexuality and other relationships that enter into the family unit. What will a job look like for anyone in the family? Are we doing trips to colleges? What does that look like when people might be on different paths? The launch is the beginning of living outside of the home. For me, it was a little more of that traditional, okay, 18, off to college, getting responsibilities, getting a job. That might look different in terms of what a launch could be. And then the post-parental stage is really continuing that communication with providers, but planning for the future in a different way, perhaps expanding what you would consider as your family unit. So roles can change over time. I mentioned that me and my siblings are all 2 years apart, but we might find ourselves in a few different roles, which may change as I move from launch, and I think other people may move in between. Sometimes we're in the adolescent stage and then the launch and then back to regroup. But those roles can change over times for families, and it's not necessarily always linked with age. You can go to the next slide. So my views can change as well. My view of autism as a child is a lot different than my view now as an adult. My view as a kid was probably in terms of time and responsibilities that I saw my parents take on. Time in terms of there's hours of doctor's appointments, traveling, therapists coming into the house. I think emotionally you feel more of those feelings of maybe confusion, frustration, embarrassment, um, and maybe a bit of jealousy too, trying to figure out, well, if they get all of this attention and have cool therapists, what, I want to play a role in that too. I'll help. I want to go to the mall and figure out how we can do this together. And then figuring out more and more of how we're growing up together. But my views have changed. So that's my kid self. I am by no means all the way developed, but we can go to the next slide. My current view of autism. Is that autistic individuals can absolutely lead an awesome, successful, amazing, and independent life. We, as a family, I do feel like we've moved more towards autism acceptance while still holding on to seeing the barriers that can come about in life. I now have new worries when I think we all sometimes can maybe feel stuck. Are we going in between stages? What's going to happen in the future? There's a lot more unknowns when the roadmap isn't as clear as maybe it was at that IEP meeting. What will life look like if I jump a stage without my sibling? And how will that impact them? So you can go to the next slide, Amy. With particular just concentration on the care team lead, which you will hear about in a moment, the care team lead is also a role that some siblings take on, and some siblings take on more than others. I know I have a few peers in my larger circle who have taken on the care team lead for their family. Some take on elements of it, the calendar keeper, the one who's going to be up on trends in movies. We're going to go see this movie. We're going to go as a family. I'm going to make sure you get to see it too, and we're all going to go. Maybe you are really not afraid of the paperwork. I'll take on any legal question or money question. For me, I think I'm the social leader, the calendar keeper, and then just trying to keep up to date on next steps in supporting our family in the autism world as a psychologist. So roles can often include, though, more responsibility and caretaking with age, especially for siblings. You can go to the next slide. So how does this impact everyone as you're thinking about the sibling in your family's life or the peer that may have joined along with your family? I think first, finding a time to check in with the family unit, who is on that team, and what roles does the peer or the sibling have in your family? Are there different stages in life that one sibling is in, and figuring out what that can look like to help them, whether that's within the launch stage or the adolescent stage or the childbearing elementary years stage? And then looking beyond maybe the biological family, who are the peers in an autistic individual's life? Look to connect with them, who has jumped into the family unit, and build those relationships with them too. So for siblings and peers, we serve a valuable role in going through these stages together and offering a unique perspective as somebody who is walking alongside in this journey. I think I'm passing it along to Maddie after these resources and things, but I'm happy to keep in touch about some next steps with siblings particularly. But what can more of that care team lead look like?
Thank you, Ellen. This is Amy. I'm actually going to take over next. But I can't see if there's any questions in the chat that you want to address or that we need to address at this point. No? Okay. I'm going to keep moving forward then.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. This is Amy again. I'm the parent of a child with autism, and I'm going to kind of talk about the family perspective of being a care team leader, which all of you probably are, and may not ever call yourself that. I know that in my life, I've been called, I'm Henry's mom pretty much all the time. Henry's mom. If I'm in appointments, I'm, referred to as mom or kiddo's mom, things like that. So, and I'm, as I've thought about that over the years, because Henry's now, over the age of 18, I'm starting to realize that I've really been kind of a care team leader most of his life. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit with you today. So as you know, the Family Echo Autism series really strives to share like all this medical and behavioral information that we have in the clinics and that we know to be really helpful for raising kids with autism. And we're trying to get that out into your hands so that you have it and you can use it in your own lives and share it with your teams and things like that. I think one of the things we're realizing is that we need to think about how do you build this this understanding of like all of the teams that you're going to be interacting with, especially when you're newly diagnosed. And when I reflect back, I look at this slide and I look at, the fact that I navigated all these complex systems of care, still do. I interact with multiple disciplines, right? I've got speech, I've got med, I've got psychology, I've got all of these people I've had to really interact with. All while the focus has been on, like trying to learn what discipline do you represent? Like, what does a psychologist do? What does the social work do? How can you help me? And then how can I put this all together, right? And I think that that's the thing that's been, I think, the most eye-opening for me is that, being able to look at all these teams, understand that I need all of these teams to help Henry live the most optimal life and have goals so that he can, reach into adulthood and, have his feet on the ground to some degree. But I wanted you to look at the number 42 that's in purple there. At one point in my life, I reflected back on a year of Henry's life, and there were 42 different professionals in our lives that I interacted with across all of these teams. And he was in middle school at the time. So this was, not that long ago. And that's pretty substantial when you think about it. Like, I also work full time. I have another daughter. I have another child, a daughter. I would like to have somewhat of my own life. And I know you probably are all many feeling the same way, is that this is a really large task to take on sometimes. And so how do we like really see ourselves as leaders in these care teams, and how do we start to build the capacity of these care teams so that it's not always on our shoulders? One of the things I say often is that, when Henry received this diagnosis of autism, I got the role of a lifetime. And I had very little education on autism. I was unsure of the resources that were available to him and to us as a family. I was very unsure of how to access care and where I needed to go. I just kind of stuck with my pediatrician. And then I, heard later that, there's a developmental and behavioral pediatrician in our area that maybe I should see them because they know a little bit more about autism. But I didn't know that. I kind of learned it along the way. But the one thing that became very clear is that I was going to be a key member in managing everything that was coming our way as far as care and treatment. And I really was not prepared for this in any way, shape, or form. And I always say this when Henry got a diagnosis, I didn't say the word autism for 2 years because I really didn't want it. So I've come to be on this session today. I've come a long ways that, I've kind of adhered to it, and I'm like, okay, we can do this and we can make this happen. And I think that's because I had some people along the way that really helped me to learn. So again, I'm hoping that that's what we'll be able to do during this series. I think another way to look at this is that I kind of look at what we do with Henry as it's kind of a family business, right? And family businesses can be very complex enterprises. And I realized, again, very early on that I was going to be sort of leading this team. But again, I looked at that middle school year of our lives, and I looked at like what was my life like with Henry at that time. And I went to 131 appointments. It took over 262 hours. And this is a breakdown of just those appointments. This does not include travel time. This does not include the fact that my daughter was with me a lot because she was younger and I couldn't leave her at home, so she came with me. But I look at this sometimes and think, how did I do this and work full time? And still manage all of these teams and all of these people and all of these responsibilities. And and I think back to the days where they used to hand me an after visit summary. Like, we would come to appointments and they would hand the after visit summary, and there were action steps that I needed to follow up on. And again, I felt very unprepared to do a lot of this. And the other thing that I think that I realize is that when you think of all the teams that you have established or that start to establish when you have a child with autism, you start to see all these different people that you're going to interact with, and and you're going to be making plans back with them and things like that. But also, there's different timelines of when you're going to see them. So, with our family, we see them daily, right? School, I saw them every day. I would interact with the teachers probably, every couple of days to see how things were going. Um, but then on a monthly basis, sometimes I would see a psychology team and all those treatment teams like speech and OT and things like that. And then his medical staff, I would only see like maybe a couple times a year. So I quickly started to realize that I was kind of the broker of all the information. Like, I held it all, and this too. you hold all this information, and your ability to share it across these teams is really helpful because then they understand what's going on in other situations, other circumstances and experiences, so that you can start to make effective treatment plans or medication, discussions, or, maybe this isn't the right environment, maybe we switch to a new one, those kinds of things. But again, I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that, our leadership on these care teams is essential so that we can get exactly what we need for, our children. So the one thing I will say is that you're probably a care team leader, and you're probably just not giving yourself the label. But when I started to think about it, when I look at all those teams again, these are things that I would do. I would coordinate appointments. I would oversee the treatment and education programs because you have to sign off on them, right? So you'd have to read through it. You'd have to, work with the team on that. You'd have to participate in all aspects of the care, education, community building with, again, all that intricacy of teams. Managing communication with teams. I did a lot of that. And this was back in the day when we weren't even sure if we could like send email, right? So we figured out different ways to communicate across all of those teams so that everyone would know. And one of my examples is when Henry was in school, he used to do spelling words in like second and third grade. But the school wouldn't send the spelling words over to a speech therapist so we could embed them into sort of some of his speech goals. So I would have to take all of that, and then they wouldn't give it to like his other classroom teachers. So they knew to like maybe hone in on those key words so that they could practice them multiple times. And they wouldn't share them with OT either. So there were all these different people who did not know that this was a goal. And so once I figured out how to give that information to everybody, we could all sort of hit those goals. So again, he had more experience to learn and master so we could move forward and we could go to the next list. So, I mean, that's just one way that I started to realize, wow, I have power, right? I have access to all of these people. They're all part of Henry's life. Now, how do I get them all on the same page so they know what we're doing? And now it's really easy. I just email everybody, right? So it's so much easier now. Or we text everybody. It's so much easier. There's not all these like, these guidelines that we have to worry about. But I think some of the other things that, came with this role of mine is that, I've had to hire and manage staff, and I've had when turnover happens, I have to manage that. Or, I also never trusted anybody until after the 6 month mark of working with Henry, so there was a vetting process that happened, but I'd never anticipated that we would have to do that. But then again, I also had to track progress and make sure we were building, reward systems, not just for him, but also for staff, because their engagement with him and their adherence to him was really important. So how did I sort of build that really solid team environment that motivated everybody to really work towards his progress? And then how do you advocate for better services? And, there was one time where I had to go into a meeting that I knew was going to be really tough. And I just didn't think I could advocate for what we needed. So I actually asked somebody else who was on the team, who was actually a case manager with me, who I said to her, you're Henry's case manager. You've known us for years. Can you say this really tough thing for me? Because I don't think I can do it. And she did. And it made me realize that I don't have to carry everything, but how do I sort of delegate so that other people can support us in a way that I may not have the skill base or the strength to do it, or I might just be worn out. It could be any of those things. But being able to understand that I can delegate that to other team members so that they can help the process move forward in an effective way was really another important thing that I learned. But, I think, again, we are all champions for our kids and we all work really hard for them. And again, that's why when I think of the language that we're using, I know I'm Henry's mom, but I'm also his care team leader. I think, when I look at this again, you are managing care appointments and treatment appointments, and you're monitoring, collecting data, you're sharing data, you're doing all of these things to help build life goals and build life plans so that, again, when we get into adulthood, we've got some foundational work. And you're the primary team, player who is, assisting in the understanding of your child and providing information so that they can build those plans and again, move on those action items. So again, you can move towards that optimal life, those optimal life goals that you may have laid out. And I just listed these things, below because again, you are the child's care team leader. So the next time someone calls you mom or, Henry's mom, it's like, I know I am, but remember the value that I bring to the table is that I'm the care team leader who really is the one person who has been here for a very long time. And it's something to think about and to honor the fact that I do have a lot of information to share. I'm a really good broker, so let's build a partnership and make things happen. And one of the reasons I say this is that, I think when we look at what does a care team leader need is that, I knew I needed a knowledge of autism, care and interventions, so that I could effectively, know what was like evidence-based practice, so I knew what kind of treatments to possibly pursue or look at medications and maybe think about it before I just jumped to the first one that came along. But I also think it was really important for me to have a good knowledge of autism, so I knew that how autism impacted Henry's social health, behavior, those kinds of things. So again, I knew what to look at, what to identify, so I could share that with my team members. I think also when it comes to things that I needed as a care team leader, is that I needed to understand the relationship I have with him, and how he processes and manages himself in this world is important for me to understand so that I can help to identify the best treatment pathways, best medications, and again, move towards that optimal life. And I feel like the more that I'm connected to him and understand him, the more he's connected to me. And I think there's a really large trust factor that happens with that. And just a symbiosis that's just really nice in our daily life. Like I can tell just by looking at him if he's in a good mood or a bad mood. If he's had enough sleep, if he's not had enough sleep. Or if we're in an environment that's way too loud and I need to get him out of there. So I think having that foundational knowledge of him is another thing as a care team leader. I think we need to know. I think also the confidence, that in advocating is so important. And Maddie's going to talk about advocating here in a little bit. But advocating is going to be a part of your life in autism, and it's been a part of mine. And there are times to advocate, very nicely, and collaboratively. And then there's times you have to advocate really in a tough manner. And I've had to do both. And while I don't really like the tough route, I've had to do it a few times. And again, it's not been my favorite thing to do, but it's been something that I've had to do. And then again, I think, when I look at, the leadership skills and managing care, again, I think having that knowledge that my teams are ever changing and I am that broker of information because I've been the one that's been the most consistent. And the reason I have this visual is because people fly out of your life, like all of a sudden they move or all of a sudden they take a different job and they're gone. And the 42 people I mentioned earlier, none of them are still here. I'm still here. I'm the only one of the 42 that are still remaining. So I am the main broker of information. And I think that when you look at your life and the number of people who've come in and out of it, remember you're the solid, you're the constant, you have all of the history, but you also are part of the future because you do have all of that history and you know how to work with teams to bring them on board so that you can again build life plans and build towards success. So when I think about this, some team expectations, and these are ones that I typically have, is that, I ask team members to, listen and take time to answer questions, help build my knowledge of autism, help my build my knowledge of, maybe whatever we're working on so I understand it. Teach me the skills that you know. And one of the things I always say is that I'm so glad that you went into autism and that you're my psychologist because you bring something to the table that I can't. It's your knowledge of psychology, it's your knowledge of autism. So help me understand what you know and specific to my son so that it builds my knowledge base so that we can start to work better and more effectively together. If you just speak to me, that's one thing, but if you partner with me, it makes a huge difference. I think also, making sure that team members understand the value that you bring and the value of your leadership is really important. When you have a team that doesn't value your leadership, it's a really tough team for me to struggle with and figure out, is this the right, are we going to be able to make progress if they just don't see me as, a part of the equation? Because at the end of the meeting, I'm the one who's going to walk out with all of the information and the action steps. The other thing too is that, I kind of expect, if I'm going to show up for meetings, I want you to show up prepared and ready to have discussions. If you're not prepared or haven't pulled things together, please don't waste my time because I had 42 other people who are waiting to talk to me who need something that I need to follow up on. And I work full time. So again, set the expectation that your team members are going to be prepared. I think asking them to help you prioritize next steps, provide really creative ideas, resources. What have they seen that's worked in other situations that's really cool that might work for you? The other thing I always say is have them provide examples of data and information they would like to know, because if they tell me what they need to know, I can collect that information all day long, all night long, all weekend long, and bring it to you so we can go, is this a behavior issue that we can manage through this technique, or do we need to go to medication, as an example? So again, being good data collectors is something that I want to do, but I also need and I have an expectation of my team members to tell me what it is that you need so that I know how to bring it to you. And again, I think I've said this earlier, but build my knowledge with what you know. And I think one of the big things is that, support and advocate me. And I used that example earlier. If I can't advocate for myself, Henry needs somebody to step into my place. So please be that person. But I always say celebrate successes with me, because if we could all have those great moments of like, this worked and it worked great, and he made a milestone, then we all win together, but he really wins the most. And I always try to end all of my meetings on a positive note, because again, we're a team. And even though things may be rough, I want to end on a positive note, because I believe that what we're doing, we can still move forward. And then again, like Ellen showed earlier, I think building your learning loop. One of the things that I say is, I'm going to start at the bottom there with participate. Don't just watch from the observation room. It's something I learned early on. Remove the glass barrier, open the door, get in the session, be active, be participating in those sessions, ask those questions, because the more you learn and the more information you gain, then the more you're going to be able to share with your team. So again, get that learning loop going so that you understand the process. Because not everybody gets to go to your speech sessions, and not everybody knows your spelling list for the day. But if you can get in there and be really active in that, and participatory, you can then share that with all of your other team members. And then again, I think as a care team leader, build that learning loop, like I just said. But, in your role, you sort of connect the dots for all those team members, and you provide a comprehensive overview of the goals for the child. And by sharing all this information, you help all of those team members work collaboratively so they can achieve those goals. And remember, you have a very powerful voice on these care teams, and your voice is significant. It's equal, and it's important. I've always said that, when I walk into a meeting and there's MDs and PhDs and, people with, 40-year histories ahead of me, I'm the MD and PhD in Henry Hess, and that's what I'm good at. And that's what I bring to the table. And I'm needed because, again, you might be new to the team, but I've been here. You might be number 43 of the 42 I've worked with, right? And then again, just some key points, ask for support, build those relationships with your key team members. Take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of anyone else. But access resources. I think also assess your leadership skills. I mean, it's something I do constantly. Like, where am I doing okay, and where do I need some help? And let us know that, so that we can build it into the series, so that we can help you in those areas too. But I always say this, and my husband and I laugh because I say it all the time, but say it often and say it loud and say it very proudly. I'm the care team leader for Henry, and my voice is really important, and I'm here to help build this, next phase of planning. And I hope we can work together on it collaboratively. I have some resources that are going to be in the main ones that we send you at the end. But one of the things I'll say is that in some of the toolkits that are in Autism Speaks, especially I think in the advocacy one, and maybe even in the first 100-day kits, there's great forms. So if you're not sure how to organize things, there's great organizational content in there that can, so you can write down like your providers' names and contact information. But there's also questions in there that will kind of help you identify what are the qualifications of the professional you're working with, and what other kinds of questions should you ask of those service providers, so that you have a better understanding of what they're bringing to the table. So I would really recommend taking a look at those, because if you haven't done that, don't have that organizational set yet, that might be a really nice place for you to start. All right, and now I'm going to hand it over to Maddie.
Thank you, Amy. I'm just going to reintroduce myself. My name is Maddie Dever, and I'm an autistic adult. And I have 4 kids who are also autistic, aged between 16 and 24. My gosh. So I've had a bit of experience. I've had a 21-year journey as a parent of autistic kids. And in the beginning, it was quite overwhelming. And it was very difficult to know what to do, what not to do, where to do it. And over time, I've built up some tools and experience having 4 kids, but I've also had the opportunity to talk with a lot of parents. And one of the things that I've realized that's really important is parents need to be able to have the capacity to learn what they need to do so that they can be able to support their kids. So for me, building parent capacity builds better quality of life for autistic kids, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide. One of the things that we're going to be doing over the course of this cycle is talking a little bit about strengths-based language each session. So today I'm just going to sort of introduce the topic of identity first and person first language. I am autistic. That's considered identity first. There are other people who prefer to use different ways of talking, which are more person first, which is the way a lot of people have been trained over the last 20 years. So a person with autism, person with autism spectrum disorder. Many adults and teens who have been diagnosed prefer the use of identity first language, but many also prefer person first. So when you're talking with somebody, just look at what their preferences are. In most cases, just say their name. All right, next slide. So the main thing I want to talk about today is building your advocacy toolbox. Over the course of this year, we're going to have different topics that we're going to help build a toolbox for you to use, so that when you're trying to advocate for your child, you've learned different things that will help you. And today we're going to be talking. We've just talked about building your care team, and I'm going to talk a little bit about self-care. Next slide. So again, this is the second tool. Self-care is extremely important, and it's something that many of us don't think about or put aside. But the greatest example I was given when somebody talked to me about this a few years ago, when you're on a plane, they always instruct you to take, if there's a problem with the plane, the oxygen max drop, take it, put on yourself, and then help your kids. The reason for that is because if you're both struggling, you both are going to have continue the struggle. But if you're able to take care of yourself, you're going to be more able to take care of your child. And so we can do the same thing in terms of our lives as parents. So when you take care of yourself, you are going to be able to be the best of you. And when you do that, this makes a huge difference towards how you're able to look at your kid. You're able to handle the things that might be tougher. And it's also good to help your child learn how to do self-care for themselves. Next slide. One of the ways that I really try to help parents is talking about yourself, looking into yourself, and not thinking about all of the struggles you have, all of the challenges, all of the things that you can't do, all of the things that are piling up. But start with, what can you do? What are your strengths? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you're strong at? And think how those strengths, you can use those to help your advocacy, to help your child. Because when you take care and you prioritize yourself, one of the examples I'll use that I had to do, sleep is a challenge for many parents, more for the autistic kids. And I had a kid who her sleep was, it would get later and later for her to fall asleep. And I was trying to stay up to, wait to fall asleep until she did. And my sleep was ragged. So the next day I was tired, I was irritable. And when she would have her challenges because she didn't sleep enough in the day, it just became a really rough. It was hard for me to help her. I was more getting on her, wasn't able to listen to her. I realized that I needed to prioritize my sleep so that I could help her. And when I did that, I found that she was starting to go to sleep earlier. And the times that she was having challenges in the day, I was there. I was ready to be able to support her because I was refreshed and I had an open mind. And I find that when we do that, when we just take small little steps to make sure that some of the things that we need, well, sometimes just eating food properly, when we do that, it really can change the course of our ability to support our kids, and they start seeing the importance of doing that in us. So there's some tools that are available that can help you sort of look at and find your strengths. There's different personality quizzes. There's different personality profiles, career things, the Enneagram. These are great things to sort of start thinking about, what can I do? What am I good at? So right now, as just for an opportunity here, if you could enter into the chat what you feel your strengths are, that will help you start that thinking of the things that you can do. All right, next slide. So self-care, some of the things that we can do to make sure that we're there for our family is try something new, do something different. Just, so many times we put aside what we want to do because we need to be there for our kids. We need to be there for this. We need to do that. Sometimes just taking one step out and saying, okay, I'm going to do something different for once. You'll find sometimes that can just give you a bit of renewal, and that little spark can actually spark the other things that you're doing in your life. Meditation is another one where you just step in and be able to focus inside yourself, give yourself time to breathe. Exercise is another one that really gets you going. You know what? Stare out the window. Just stare at the window, see what's happening. Sometimes letting go in the small things can give us the peace that we need to be able to do the bigger things. Spend time outside. Today, I've had a bit of a difficult day today, but before this meeting, I just rolled out in my wheelchair to the river down the road from us, and I just sat there. And it just sometimes just looking at the river, feeling the wind, just gives me an opportunity to breathe, reset a bit, and then get back to my crazy life. And here's one that's hard for me. Limit your exposure. Take a break from news and social media. There's a lot going on in the States. There's a lot going on in the world. And sometimes social media just can drive us, take away a lot of the time that we could use for other things. So I'm not saying don't use it at all, but sometimes just putting it off for a couple hours, leaving it off for a day can allow you to do more with your life. Next slide. So some practical strategies that'll help you build your advocacy toolbox. So build a routine in your day. Just even starting with one thing that you can do every day gives you a chance to set a pattern that will allow you to support yourself or your family. Create a visual calendar. Visuals are really helpful, and sometimes just putting a calendar on the wall and putting little things of what's happening gives you an opportunity to, again, set yourself to a pattern that can benefit you and your kids. Identify the role changes and roles. So sometimes things change, and asking questions for the people that are in our team can always help. If you see something is changing and you see that you may need a role to be different, communication. It's really important. It's important to access whatever the supports that are available. Sometimes you get it. You're accessing a support, and you're having a challenge with the provider, with the team, and sometimes it just takes just changing things around a bit and looking at it a different way, trying to approach it differently, opens up opportunities that can smooth things out. And connect with the school, connect with the therapist, connect with people outside of your family to ensure that you've got the opportunity to grow and get help when you're hitting struggles. All right, next slide. So it's okay to not be okay. This is something that we feel overwhelmed. We have the weight of trying to get all of the barriers that our kids have removed, support all of the 42 plus people that are supporting our kids. And sometimes it's just challenge, and sometimes it's too much, and it's okay. That's why coming to things like this, you and I are here today so that we can get that a chance to breathe and refocus. It's okay. Some days are hard, but others can be much better. Things take time to learn, and sometimes we think we learn it, our kid changes, and we have to learn it again. So master one tool at a time to really be able to focus on one thing that you need to do for yourself, or one thing you need to do for your child. Or sometimes I the way I look at it is I in my browser I tend to have 30, 50, 75 tabs going. I need to be able to do a little bit of each thing to keep myself going forward. Sometimes though, I just have to take one screen up and focus on that one thing. And that can be the same thing about what we're trying to do to make things grow and being able to handle the things that are going on in our life. So just being here today is a positive step in the journey of being a parent of your amazing autistic child. I'm glad you're here. Next slide. So today, these are the first tools that you've got in your toolbox that you're going to build over this year. Over the course of this year, we've got different topics on anxiety. We have topics on life and advocacy on as an autistic, which I'm going to talk about. Sleep, that's a huge one. Challenging behavior, which we experience a lot. Transition to adulthood. Yes, we do become autistic adults. Behavior management and empowering women. These are so many things that can help you add to that toolbox so that you're able to advocate for yourself and for your family. And today, you're going to learn in a few minutes about some of the resources that we have that'll be able to add to this toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maddie. We've got a little bit of time left today, and we're going to take some time for some questions here. We've had a few wonderful questions in the chat throughout the conversation, so I will start with those. But as you're sort of processing this information and thinking about the wonderful information that Ellen and Amy and Maddie have just shared with you, please feel free to raise your hand or drop a question in the chat. So we can get a little bit of discussion going. The first question I'm gonna throw out to the whole group. I would love, there was a great question in the chat from a participant who wanted to know if there were things that your parents did to help you not feel left out. And Ellen, I think this one's geared towards you, or like you weren't getting any attention as a sibling. So I wonder if you can put your sibling hat on and help us think about what your parents did or maybe didn't do that you would think would be important for our audience to consider today.
Yeah, wonderful question. And thinking about the sibling and the family and the peers in a family unit is really important because we are like sitting right here and alongside in those early therapy days, listening in on IEP meetings and sometimes being a part of particular kind of programs and interventions as well. So things, I wrote down 3 things as I was thinking through this question. So were there things that my parents did to help me feel like maybe not left out or have more attention? And I think the first one is that I felt safe to share if I was frustrated, if I needed something, if something was unfair. I felt like I had that strength within my relationship with my parents that I could just unload. And I know probably in the teenage years that could have been a lot. I'm sharing just maybe a lot of frustration or lots of emotions all coming together, but I felt like I could share those without judgment. The next is that they were open to hearing my feedback about how things were going, my perspective in, hey, have you tried it this way? Or he is having a harder time with this transition. Like, don't you guys know it's just because of this? And being open to trying out, like, if we could do something different based on my feedback and seeing if that would work. I know Amy has a story similar to mine of, oh, you just do it this way, calling across the room. And Sophie was right. And then number 3 is space to be involved in any way that I felt comfortable in those moments. Sometimes that looked like on the ground, like really working with my siblings and their therapist, and then other times involved in different ways. So I saw that sib shops were thrown in there. So some sibs, that's a great way to start by learning more about involvement. Finding your own peers to go along this journey with, which is really what sib shops are geared for. I see a lot in the chat about how to find those a little bit maybe more local to your area. So I'll make sure that we have our autism response team on that too. But yeah, sib shops so that you could see that you are not alone in this journey.
I love that, Ellen. So many great ideas. And we will try to collate some information about sib shops and other sibling resources to include in those resources that we email out to all of you as participants. So stay tuned for that. We may not get all of those details in the chat, but we will do our best to get those resources to you. Next question, I think we'll maybe start with Amy and go from there. But Amy, I wonder if you can help us think through what strategies might be effective in helping to coordinate care for caregivers who might be separated or divorced. So you talked a lot about sharing data and information. Any ideas for how we share that information, particularly if parents or caregivers are separated or divorced, or they might be seeing different behaviors, different data in different settings or with different people?
Yeah, yeah, Lisa, I think it's a great question, and it's something that I've had lots of families ask me about. It kind of depends on the relationship, right? So I feel like, or from what I've sort of experienced with other families, is that if the divorce is fairly amicable and there's a lot of sharing going back and forth, it's typically like let's have a central location. I've seen people use like Google Docs to like make sure they collect information, so it's all in one location, so it's central just for that child, right? Um, but in other cases where there may not be a lot of conversation going back and forth, and you might be seeing really different behaviors from one setting to another, the thing that we've talked to families about is how's that information with the provider you're working with, so they have both those perspectives and they can put it together and then work with the parents individually if that's kind of the direction that they're going in. It's the one thing I try to always say to families is, the information that you need and that you share is really about the child. So if you can centralize it for the child so that everyone has access to it and they can see it, then the child wins in that scenario. So try to, to do your best in that area, or in that sort of, model. But if you can't, house it with the clinician. Or, the other thing I always say is get a marriage family counselor involved, and they can help you process a lot of that. Get a, social worker to help you as well, and maybe do, individual sessions, whatever it might be. But again, go back to your treatment team, I think is the best thing to do in that scenario. Is that helpful?
Yeah, super helpful, Amy. And again, I think it's so important to remember that that's really going to vary depending on the family situation and the relationship between caregivers, sort of how functional things may be or cooperative. The next question we had, I think, is a great one. And Maddie and Amy, I think you have some energy and excitement behind this one. But Zane had a great question about where participants can find additional opportunities for leadership development. So for folks who are already strong advocates but want to learn more and sort of develop their skills in this role as a parent even more.
Maddie, you want to go first?
I,
I
I,
can't. I have some
I,
ideas if you want a minute.
I think that most of the children's hospitals and children's treatment centers that are involved in the care of your kids are great places to to ask if there's a family council and to see if you can be part of that, or in each of your areas if there's a division of a chapter of Autism Speaks or another autism organization, working with other parents in an advocating together. I've always found so much easier to get changes made than trying to advocate for my own kids or for myself. So I think finding opportunities where there are other advocates and advocating alongside of them, both, I think that has the opportunity to have a bigger impact, and also will then give you this more skills to reflect back in advocating for your family.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Maddie. Anything you'd add, Amy?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add is put yourself in different environments, right?
Mhm.
So I think I've learned a lot by being active in community boards, by volunteering for big events, by participating in PTA and school board, because I think by exposing myself to how others navigate leadership and have discussions and come to consensus, make plans, execute plans, it's been helpful for me to go, okay, I'm running a small business. It's called Henry Hess. Now, how do I sort of put some of those strategies into play here? But again, the thing I like about that, for me anyway, is that it helped me learn from a variety of learners who are not just in the healthcare field, right? But also it gave me access to learning more about the community that I live in and how I can be a participant and how I can sort of bring Henry into that community as well.
That's fantastic. I'll share in Massachusetts, and I'm sure in other places, we do have some really wonderful parent organizations through the special education community as well that will often bring in speakers and resources to sort of help parents learn more about the process and all the work that they're doing. So I find our SPED packs to be really helpful groups of parents as well. Any other questions? I think I caught most of them in the chat, but there may be a few others. If I've missed any Hub team members, feel free to jump in, or if somebody has a question, would like to raise your hand and unmute, we would be happy to take your question today. As you're thinking about that, I'm going to throw one out to our, Monique, let's go ahead and have you unmute, and then I'll save my question for a minute. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So my question, I know that on here that you said like build a care team. Now I know everyone's from like different states here, but I know in New Jersey that sometimes with the Medicaid, it is really hard sometimes to really build that team because of different providers accepting, their insurance that, that if the family is on Medicaid. So I wanted to know what advice could you give if, when you do face those challenges, when you don't have like private insurance to get a lot of these services or to have that care team?
Great question, Monique. That's such a challenge and really varies location to location. Do any of our presenters want to tackle that first, and then we can open it up to our hub team? I think, Amy, I see you unmuting as you're thinking. One of the things that I'll sort of toss out there, Monique, is that many states have advocacy organizations around insurance coverage, and the legislation that's passed over the last 5-10 years has really moved insurance policy and insurance companies towards covering more autism related supports and services. And while that started with private insurers, it is trickling down to public insurance as well, and may vary location to location. But I would encourage you to ask your team, if you have a doctor at a medical center, your pediatrician even, if they're aware of any advocacy in sort of organizations in your area, or organizations that specifically are advocating for coverage for services. So that's one thing that I might encourage you to do. There also are, occasionally, if there's a specific need that your child or family has, there are occasionally some philanthropic grant opportunities that can be really helpful to keep your eye out for. Things are expensive, right? AAC devices can be expensive. If your insurance isn't covering something like a device, finding some of those opportunities for philanthropic funding can be really helpful. And again, your pediatrician or a specialist in an autism center may be able to help connect you with some of those grant opportunities as they become available. Amy, I wonder if you have any other thoughts.
No, I like everything that you're saying. The other thing that I would say is that when you're in those offices, talk to them about how you maybe be able to be connected to like social work and things like that for somebody who can, again, help you start that case management thing so that you can start to stitch together things. Like when I talk about care teams too, it's like, it's really about putting all the people that are kind of active together into discussions and things like that. But my core care team, what I typically do is go back and say, this is what I need. Who is the person that we can reach out to? How do I access it? And if it's like, like you're saying, like the funding's not going to cover it, then what's another avenue that's parallel to that we can go for? So I think asking those questions, which is fantastic, because the more you ask those questions, the more that you can start to find those resources and they can help you navigate those paths. But, don't stop there. If they say, well, it's not an option, say, well, why not? And what is an option? Like keep moving the discussion forward, never take no for an answer.
I love that persistence.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
One of the things I'd add is when you're looking at who is the care team for your child and for your family, knowing where your gaps are is just as important as knowing who's filling the role, because that makes it makes it easier to focus on what you need to find, and when the opportunities come about, you know where that gap is that you need to fill.
That's a great point, Maddie. Thanks so much. We've got 2 hands raised. So we're going to start with Lillian, and then Teresa, we're going to come to you next. So just get ready. Lillian, if you want to unmute and ask your question, we'd love to have you jump in. We'll see. As Lillian's working on getting unmuted, Teresa, why don't we have you unmute? I'll have you jump in with your question and we can circle back to Lillian. Our muting may be challenging today. Let's see if we can. There we go.
Okay, did I get it?
You got it.
This is the first time that I've ever did this. So anyways, I didn't really have so much a question, but kind of like a comment. We're just now getting help. We have a caseworker through My Care, and she has helped us with all kinds of resources. And my daughter, she's struggling real bad. She's 14, and we started out when she was 4. So 10 years now. We've at first it started out with the ADHD. We got diagnosed with that. And then it went to she's got severe OCD. She's a hypochondriac. Like it's took years to get exactly what we need. So finally, since we got this caseworker, she's opened up a lot of possibilities in our life.
I love
And
that. I love
yeah,
that.
like she's great. She's great. And so my daughter, she's been to she suffers like real bad. And so she's been in the hospital in this past year, probably about 5 times.
And
Because
Teresa,
I thought
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure we are able to protect your daughter's privacy in our call today, because this is a large call. I so appreciate you sharing the helpfulness that you've experienced with that caseworker. And I think that's a really great point to remind all of our participants about, that if you're connected with an agency, a hospital, a clinic, an organization that has case management services, connecting to that resource can be so helpful. I really love that idea and appreciate you sharing that resource. It does look like Lillian was able to unmute. Do you want to pop in and ask your question? And I'll just remind our participants to make sure we're asking our general questions today and not sharing any protected health information for your children and loved ones.
Absolutely. I have a set of twins, a boy and a girl twin. They're both on the spectrum. The girl is a little more moderate and the boy is more mild. My concern is for my own mental and physical health. I've seen all of it deteriorating since about 2.5 years ago, when I started taking on being the manager of their cases and trying to get to all the appointments and trying to keep up with my other 2 kids. So I have 4 children. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and my time is extremely limited. Yes, I have respite care, but it's 10 hours a week. It's not much.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's any advice or any resources for a mom like myself who has 4 children, 2 on the spectrum, and how to not alienate the other 2 children. I really feel like sometimes I'm really focused on my daughter more than anybody else, and I kind of alienate the other 3 children, even the autistic boy. It's just a lot. There's a lot going on here.
Such a tall order. It's a long list of things to manage. Ellen, I think, shared some really nice resources about that sibling perspective. And I wonder if Ellen might be able to put those again in the chat for us to sort of think through how to help support siblings and make sure your other children aren't feeling alienated, as maybe Amy and Maddie share their perspective as parents in terms of maybe thinking about the top 1 or 2 things that you've done to try to chip away at your own self-care amidst a really long and important to-do list.
Okay, thank you.
So I have 5 kids. 4 of them are autistic, but they've been diagnosed at different points of their life. And there have been, over time, each child has had at a point where we've needed to prioritize our time and energy on supporting them and their needs at that time. And it is definitely challenging for those other siblings who are getting less attention. I know my second child really ended up with a lot of anger and frustration with being not feeling that her needs, that everything was focused on the other 2. Over time, she has seen that her needs have been met at times too, but it's a challenge. The more kids you have, the more challenging your parenting is. So you add a complex child to that mix, and everything just becomes even more challenging. And I think respite is great. Finding ways for the other kids to be able to use some respite time so that they can do things on their own, that they can just be a kid and not be the sibling of an autistic, is really helpful. That my daughter felt that way, as long as she's not using that respite time to learn about autism. No, it's just has the times that she's had the opportunity just to get away and be having a some focus on them is really helpful. So yeah, respite has been the thing that's been really helpful in our family.
You know, this is Amy, and I would just add, I think again, reaching back to the people that are your currently like, you know, your team members, like I would start to have those conversations like, look, this is really becoming overwhelming. What is available for me through you, through you, through you, so that people can start to help you, you know, find resources to support you. And I think, you know, the one thing that, you know, and I have a really hard time doing this is just being really honest. Like I'm overwhelmed, you know, and I can't, I need to look at how I can have some time to just, you know, sort of debrief, calm down, whatever it might be, just have a moment to myself, whatever it might be, you know, a day, whatever it might be. But I think just being really honest with people to say, I'm getting really overwhelmed and I need help and I need support. What is out there for me? What can you do? And I think also if you have family that can come in and, you know, sit for like a half an hour, or a neighbor who can sit for half an hour, it gives you a half an hour that you can get out of the house and have that moment, right? So it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be big. It can be really little, with little pieces of, you know, little supports around you, and then you can start to build it into something bigger. But have the conversation, I need support, and have it with as many people that are currently involved in your life as possible. All right, so I think we put the poll questions up, right? Is that done?
We sure did.
Yeah, we've got 50 people now. We'd like to get more. So if you've not filled out the poll, please do. It helps us to design the series. It helps us to figure out what is it that you need so that we build it into the series. This series is completely designed because of your input. So your input's incredibly valuable. So keep filling that out. And I think I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide here. And I think, oops, Tony, I went too fast. This is yours, Tony.
Thank you, Amy. Well, again, my name is Tony Hernandez. I'm part of the Autism Response team. I'm an art bilingual specialist. And I just wanted to share here a little bit about the resources that we have from our end and Autism Speaks for our families and communities. I encourage all of you to, to reach out to use our resource guide. It's a great tool to use for families if you're looking for services, supports for your loved ones, whether it's therapy services, support in the school. It's a wide variety of different resources, especially in your area. So I encourage you all to use our resource guide. We also have our list of providers, both state and international, and also the information about the Parent Training and Information Center. And last but not least, these are some of the Facebook groups that we have from our end, which is the Navigating the New Autism Diagnosis, which is a very, very important support group for both children and adults, and also our Voces Latinas of Autism Speaks group, especially for our Spanish speaking families. But more important than that, we encourage all to reach out to our Autism Response team for any questions about resources and supports that can help your loved ones and to provide the best quality of life. And we're here to serve, and we appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. The one thing I will say is that when you get the link for the videos, that because you can watch back what we've discussed today, there is a way that you can switch it into your language on YouTube. So if you have any difficulty navigating that, let us know. But everything will come out in English and Spanish, like he said. And let's see. Next slide is, here is the list of sessions that are coming up, which Maddie actually shared on an earlier slide. Here's the dates, and there's a QR code. You can use your camera to actually go straight to the web page so you can register for them. You can register all the way out for all of them. There's a registration link for each individual one, because again, this isn't cohort based, it's individual session based. So you can pick and choose which ones you'd like to come to. So we have more in planning. We've got 3 that are actually in planning right now for after April of 2024. So we will keep you posted on what those are going to be. And it was great to see all of you. The next session is anxiety. It's on November the 8th. So anxiety and autism. Lisa Nowinski, who's here with us today, will be on that session, as well as Amanda Bennett. So you're going to get psychology and med perspective on that, as well as a case discussion about it. So we look forward to seeing you then. If you haven't finished the poll yet, I'm going to give you another couple seconds to do that before we say goodbye. But it was great to see all of you. We hope you learned some things today. Again, fill out the poll, send us your input so we can design the series that meet your needs. All right. Great to see everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much.